Hey, how's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to the weekend. It is the Earthmaster out here about 12:14 p.m. here, California time, December 7th, 2024, Saturday. Hope everyone's having a wonderful weekend out here so far. The seismograph station here across Northern California, Petrolia, right here around this where the hand is quite active there in terms of seismic activity still. So let's take a look here at Northern California where that 7-pointer struck here 2 days ago now. Looks like the latest earthquake here in this area going to be a 3.6 from, looks like about 11:54 here. So we're looking at 20 minutes or so ago is the latest earthquake for a 3.6. But as you can see here on the seismograph station, there is still some smaller earthquake activity not being reported out here. So, you know how I feel about this. It looks like they're only reporting a certain number of earthquakes per hour and not even counting some of these smaller ones that are indeed earthquakes. So we'll continue to check back on it. But as of a total right now, according to the USGS here, 279 earthquakes following the 7.0 a couple days ago. I still find it quite rare, though, and odd that we have not seen anything above a 4. That's the largest aftershock of 4.7. That's actually quite rare to not see a 5 or even maybe a 6 here. So no guarantee that we're out of the woods here yet in terms of larger scale potential. They say after a certain amount of days, then the likelihood of a larger quake diminishes, but that's not always the case in this type of dynamic plate boundary here. They could say that about one area, but when you have 3 plates here at the Mendocino Triple Point Junction here, it works a little bit differently. So just odd, right? Nothing above 5.0, even though there was somewhat of some 5s following the 7-pointer that popped up on the map, and then they got removed and downgraded. Just kind of odd. So still shaking, still rattling and rolling out there across the area of Northern California, just outside of Eureka. According to the USGS here in the last 24 hours, 76 earthquakes, with the last one being a 3.6. I'm going to keep checking back on this seismograph station, though, because there's some earthquake activity coming in that's not being reported. Far as migrational movement goes, in terms of any interesting activity, there's a little line of movement here inland. This is from yesterday, a little 2.3. This has not been reviewed yet, still underneath automatic status. So that means it could be just a false earthquake that has not been updated yet by seismologists, and they have not reviewed it there in terms of the accuracy. So it looks like some of these quakes here may not be actually legit earthquakes there. They may be earthquakes, but the location may be wrong. Still underneath automatic status. The rest of the West Coast out here, nothing showing up on the USGS map, but they have, I look at these maps for years and hours a day. This is what I do. On the weekends here, they stop reporting any of the smaller microquakes out here. In fact, they turn their preliminary data systems there to only report pretty much, I think, 2.5 and above out here. Even though a lot of times during the week, we'll see, some of these smaller quakes showing up there on the weekday. But during the weekends, this is absolutely quiet unless we see anything above a 2.5 level, even though there's maybe some earthquake activity out here. Same for Yellowstone. And maybe that's the case here for Northern California as well. But as I showed you guys in the last couple updates here, yesterday morning, there was about 3.5 hour of data blackout. Nothing being reported. Well, there was maybe 1 or 2 earthquakes in that time frame that got reported from the USGS, listed up here on the map, even though we had watched numerous earthquakes coming into both of these seismograph stations here, the Petrolia and the Dinsmore. Notice that some of these quakes here may not be showing up right now on the Dinsmore station, so these are local to the seismograph station and not necessarily anything, probably below a 2.0 magnitude level. We do have one coming in right now, it looks like, on the Dinsmore station, a little spike there that may we'll have to see once this adjusts here if it's going to be anything bigger than these little small microquakes. So I'm still continuing to watch this, folks. I don't like the fact that all the activity is not being reported. Further down south here, a little bit of larger movement down south here today. Here's a 2.5 map and above. Shows a 2.6 here just after midnight and a more recent 3.1 here in Southern California. Now, this is at the southern end of the San Jacinto Fault Zone, a fairly lengthy fault system here on the Pacific side here of the plate boundary. The San Andreas Fault, of course, right here in the darker red line. That is the plate boundary between the two the plates, North American here to the north and east, Pacific here on this side. So getting a little bit of bouncing back and forth earthquake activity here in the last couple hours around Southern California between the two plates. No major swarming going on, but it does look like we're seeing a little increase in the magnitude level here across Southern California. So just be on guard. Southern California has been ramping up as well in terms of the elevated seismicity pattern out here in the last few months. A lot more fours out here in the southern portion of the state than, and Dr. Lucy Jones stated this, a lot more fours, elevated fours this year than at any time since about the mid-'80s. So that right there tells you something. Also some interesting facts there about this 7-pointer that struck here a couple days in Northern California. That was the strongest 7-pointer since 1994. We've had some upper sixes out here, but for 7.0 and above, that's the largest one there since 1994. 1994 also coincides with the Northridge earthquake, right down here across Los Angeles. I'm going to do just a little search here, show you guys some historical patterns out here, and maybe Southern California might just be due here for their own 7-pointer. I'm going to go back here since about 1980. I don't want to include every single quake out here. And California, of course, sees a lot. So let's go ahead and zoom in here to, I did not mean to do the whole world. Well, this is still working. There's our earthquake activity up there across Northern California. 7.0, the last one. Off of this area, we had a 7.2, right? That was off the plate boundary into the Gorda plate. So really not, you really can't say it was here in this region where we've seen a lot of 6s here recently. Specifically here in this area, the last one, a 7.1 back in 1994, like I mentioned, along the same plate boundary, right? This is the Mendocino fault system here. And that's the plate boundary between the Pacific plate here to the south, which is a large, massive plate here. And you got the Gorda plate, a little smaller plate here, microplate to the north. And this microplate here is being subducted underneath the North American plate, which begins right here at the Cascadia subduction zone. So even though the land here, we got land and then oceanic crust here, this plate boundary eastward is the North American plate. So you got that triple point boundary right here where a lot of dynamic activity takes place here. And there's some of those 6s we've seen here recently. It looks like a 6.6 back in 2016, a little bit further along the plate boundary. But this one's a little bit closer inland. Let's see, the 7.2, that was 1992. Looks like we had a couple 7s there within a couple years of each other. 1992 was pretty active down here. So 1994, right? We had the our last 7-pointer back in September 1994. Go down to Southern California here, the Northridge earthquake, 6.7, 1994. That was back in January. There's definitely some patterns out here across the West Coast here recently. And I'm starting to believe Southern California will probably see something large out here soon. with all the elevated seismic activity out here recently. A lot of fours all over the place, as you guys remember. But we do get these little quiet spells, where things just happen to show some microquake activity out here all over Southern California. But, the number of fours out here have been quite impressive this year. How many did we have? Let's take a look here. We can revise this real quick. Modify search. We're going to go 4.0 and above. Not since 1980, but I guess we could. What did she say? Since about 1984 is a number of fours that we've seen most this year compared to any other year. But I don't want the whole world. I want to look at specifically around Southern California area. But we can't include the Ridgecrest sequence, right? Because that's associated with a large earthquake. The number of fours that I'm talking about, and Dr. Lucy Jones is talking about, is outside of a main sequence event, such as a Ridgecrest earthquake, right? That was 6.9 and 7.1. We're not going to count those fours in that area because that was associated with a big event. So there's obviously going to be a number of fours. Hopefully this doesn't. There we go. That's a lot of fours down here. But got to remember, don't want to count the Ridgecrest sequence here of earthquakes. So this year alone, let's see here. We got a number of them. Look at all those fours. So 4.0 and above. There's 5.2. Man, it may be too numerous to count here. I'm going down the list here, and all these are from this year alone in Southern California. You guys see that? Man, it's a lot. So, and it stops right about here. We had a number last year as well, but nothing like what we had seen this year. So the number of earthquakes obviously going up out here, indicative of the strain built up across the plate boundary here of Southern California. So even though right now the activity is up north in Northern California in terms of larger scale adjustment, there's still obviously strain out here across California. We know the San Andreas Fault is built up, highly wound up like a spring, so tight. I don't know how much tighter it could get. I've been hearing about the big one there in Southern California for quite a while, and we have yet to have it. That just means we're 1 second, 1 minute, 1 date closer to the big one. So still got to be on guard out here, folks. Just because Northern California is in the spotlight right now does not take away the fact that Southern California it's right there too. Just about ready. 11:54. See, did they add a quake on here? Let's see, 11:54, 3.5. I'm gonna look at these seismograph stations real quick. Yeah, that's still a little old, but there's a number of smaller quakes showing up there. Obviously, I want to watch it and see if they're going to cover some of these quakes that show up on the other seismograph stations. Obviously, it's legit earthquake activity and not being reported out here. All right, so cover California here. Got to keep an eye on it. Somewhat elevated activity here today down south with that 3-pointer. Inland activity, nothing shown up there on the map, but that doesn't mean there's not earthquake activity happening because it is the weekend. USGS is out of the office, and they won't put anything in terms of 2.5 and below on the map until they get into office Monday morning, probably after their coffee and morning meeting. So Yellowstone seismograph stations I like to go through just to verify there's no major swarm going on. Right, this is the last 24 hours of seismic activity. There's a little bit of earthquake activity here across the Madison River area, west boundary region of Yellowstone. We got 2 quakes here, another one up here. Looking at the seismograph stations and how they showed up, just mainly locally here, probably a 1.5 is the magnitude level for those earthquakes. So very small earthquake activity, nothing big going on there across Yellowstone National Park. Super volcano for now. Scary word, right? It'd be a scary world if that thing did have a full-scale eruption. Oil fields out here. 2.2 out around the Minotone region outside of Pecos, Texas, down there in the desert. Out in the oil fields, getting some earthquake activity out there. The rest of the region here, not a whole lot going on through the New Madrid seismic zone. Pretty quiet there. One earthquake out around the Charleston area, South Carolina. This is a region that had a large earthquake. Man, I don't remember the exact date, but it sits in the hazard zone there. The large earthquake activity struck prior to any, large-scale population development. But we've been getting a number of smaller quakes out here. We got 3 of them in the last 30 days. As you can see, just a couple smaller quakes. I want to look here real quick. I've mentioned that a number of times that this area gets some large earthquake activity, but I can't remember the exact date. So I want to check that real quick, see what we have here. We're going to go 4.5 and above, and I know it was way back, so we're just going to go back to the year 1000, even though that probably wasn't the year that struck out there. So let's just check here around this region. Pretty neat little feature that the USGS has in terms of searching the earthquake history. So as you can see, not a whole lot of earthquake activity on the map, but 1886 is the date. 7.0 underneath this area. This is a highly populated area right now. Back in the 1800s, probably not so much. A lot of infrastructure built up out here. A lot of, as I mentioned, population density. So this is just another area out here that can see some large earthquake activity. In fact, everywhere out here where it's listed on the U.S. hazard map can see some large earthquakes. New Madrid seismic zone over here around the Great Smoky Mountains range, even up around New York, Virginia area. But you're not safe out there in the center portion of the country either. You got oil fields all across Texas that are getting hit with a lot of earthquake activity. But those are the main regions where we can see some large earthquake activity, aside from west of the Rockies. It's obvious here with the plate boundary, a lot of built-up strain out there. So we'll continue to watch it. I do like to pay attention to these little quakes there around a major player of a fault system that produces earthquakes out there. Nothing showing up back yet here across that map. All right, let's take a look here at the worldwide activity. Anything else going on here across the globe? Still not a whole lot of movement here across the Pacific northwestern edge here of the Pacific Plate. That includes Japan northward here across the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. Pretty quiet here since those 2 deep quakes. About the time we had those 2 deep quakes here underneath the Sea of Osk area, that is about the time we've seen an uptick of microquake activity all across the Northern California area, inland into Nevada, all across the area. Obviously, it was well lit up in terms of microquake activity, indicating the presence here of a strain event along the plate boundary. Even had some activity here prior to that 7-pointer. So that was actually 1 day prior to the 7-pointer that I noticed a deeper activity here in major elevated microquake activity across the West Coast. And this area popped, Northern California. This area has not had any further activity since then. So still got to watch that. The Kuril-Kamchatka here capable of producing a megaquake, and nothing showing up on it since that activity prior to the 7-pointer over in Northern California. So it's another hotspot area to watch pretty closely. Out in the Pacific, a little bit of microquake activity out there today. Really nothing big going on. We are getting at a point here where we could see some eruption activity out there across Kilauea Volcano around one of the rift zones here soon. And I say that because the deformation data here, if you look at the last year, there's our last couple eruptions there back in February. Had one, we had some small ones there in the summertime as well across the, it was just off the summit there to the southwest. and then our most recent one here. This is a deflation when it drops down from the graph here. This is inflation as it makes that rise here on the graph across the summit and the upper east rift zone. So when we deplete magma from below, obviously the GPS will show a deflationary event. Look at these levels right here. We are matched, if not matched, maybe even above the previous level seen there prior to the eruption, any eruption there across the summit and the upper east rift zone. So things are should be starting to kick up here real soon in terms of maybe a magma displacement somewhere, or even a slight fissure event somewhere out there in the region. Just really no clues right now. We got to watch the earthquake activity, because that will be indicative there on the map, indicating strain underneath the surface. And it's just kind of all scattered out here across the area for right now. But I'll continue to watch that. Activity down south, excuse me here, around the Pahala area. This is all deeper areas underneath the Big Island there, associated with the whole plumbing system there of the magma activity down below. Let's take a glance here at the rest of the world. I am going to drop this date down a little bit now that the earthquakes have mellowed out slightly there across Northern California. We don't need to keep it almost 2 days there on the globe. So this is the last 24 hours of earthquake activity, EMSC, and also the USGS. Looks like there's a 4-pointer down across the area of the Indonesia Islands area. Pretty good cluster going on here today. But that's very common on any given day here. If you look at the earthquake maps, you'll know that. Really no major movement here across the Java Trench for now. We are getting a handful of earthquakes here across the Himalayas. Quite a bit of movement, actually. Some force stirring up out there this morning. New Zealand, 3s are the magic number there across the board for now. No major earthquake activity to report down there. And the South America area, some decent movement all across that major subduction zone there called the Peru-Chile Trench. Got some newer activity out here in the Atlantic Ocean, way down south here. 5.6 out in one of these fracture zones there. Let's see. The Goff, is that right? I'm thinking that's the only way you can pronounce that. Goff. Cough, right? Cough, Goff. All right, fracture zone. One earthquake. Aside from that, pretty quiet out there across the rest of the Atlantic for now. Let's go ahead and give a quick glance here at the space weather activity. Then we'll move on. A little bit of M flare activity, it looks like, here this morning. A low-grade M flare from one of the sunspots there on the sun. Looking at the chart here, the UV image of the sun, probably one of these areas back over here producing that M flare activity. Unfortunately, we don't have access to the colored magnetogram image, which would show, the complexity of the sunspots here. So, I mean, we got the black and white version, but that really doesn't give us all that much in terms of what to look for in terms of magnetic structure and complexity here. This image from the 26th, I'm hoping they get this back up online. They had some type of flooding event there at the Stanford University, which we have not been able to access the data there on some of the SDO imagery. So we have to deal with this generic version for now. Anyway, good thing we have the flare chart up. Nothing major going on the flares. Still very minimal percentages in terms of stronger flares possibilities. 99% chance for a C flare, obviously. M flare, 50%. X flare, the stronger flares, 5% or less. No major roars there in the forecast for now, folks. Look at the Storm Prediction Center. Thunderstorm activity there across portions of Texas and Louisiana area over the next couple days. They actually got quite a bit of rain coming into that area as we look at the forecast models here. Got a little bit of Gulf moisture stirring up there into the Texas and Louisiana area. As we put this into motion, you'll see that rainfall accumulate there across areas of the south as well as we head into early next week. That being tapped into by this massive low pressure system up here across the Great Lakes states, pulling in some of this moisture. Further out, looks like that's going to linger around for a little bit and bring the eastern seaboard quite a bit of rainfall here. High and dry out here across California for now. It looks like maybe towards the 14th of December here, in about a week, we could get a return of some wet weather out there. But that's, even so, that doesn't even look like it's a direct hit on California. That is sad. Man, I had my fingers crossed here. I was very hopeful that our last atmospheric river event was a sign of things to come. That we were going to have a pretty wet winter, because I picked up 7 inches of rainfall there in 2.5 days from our last storm, which was I think it's been almost a month ago now, and nothing in the forecast really that's anything promising. This is on the 21st, but even then that could change here. So I'm man. All right, well, just got to deal with it, I guess. Hopefully Mother Nature will stir things up out here and bring us more rainfall, because we need it. Definitely need it out here. All right, real quick glance here at the seismograph stations. There's one earthquake, right? Petrolia also showing up here on the Dinsmore stations. So let's go see if they're reporting it. Nope. Still got the 3.5 there from almost an hour ago now. So that's just what I'm here to show you guys. Even though, they're saying this number here, 76 earthquakes in the last 24 hours, that number is false. There's a lot more earthquake activity happening, and we see it on the seismograph stations there, but it's not being reported. It's not even filling back in. I'll continue to watch it, folks, and report back on anything that changes out here. But for now, live stream will be up. Seismograph stations obviously up as well, so we can keep an eye on the activity, whether it's reported or not, I guess. Keep an eye there on Southern California. Lighten up slightly out there, including, like I mentioned, that 3-pointer, some other smaller quakes out there. We'll just see how this weekend plays out. Just stay safe out there, have an earthquake plan, and remember, download that MyShake app on your phone. It's an early alert system there for your iOS or your Samsung or whatever you use for your cellular device. It's free. It was actually a 20-second window between the time I got that earthquake alert telling me to drop, and whatnot during a strong event. 20 seconds. From the time I got that alert to the time I felt that rolling motion there, a wavy motion here across Northern California from that 7-pointer a couple days ago. So obviously it does take a little time for the wave to travel. I don't know how much time it took from the folks here locally across Eureka and other areas around the epicenter area, but it's definitely worth having on your phone. So it's called the MyShake Alert early warning system there, and it goes off whether you have your phone on silent or not. And 20 seconds here for me from this distance. All right, folks, have a good one. We will catch you guys back out here a little bit later on this evening. Take care. Enjoy your Saturday. Beautiful day out here in Northern California, but it's not supposed to be beautiful in the wintertime. It's supposed to be rainy and cold. Have a good one. We'll catch you guys out here later. Stay safe.